downtown Messing, and they would make.
What part did you live in?
I lived in make these special. I would call it like donuts that were fried, in deep fat, and it was wonderful. And then they had dances. Everybody went,
And they had live musicians
they
playing
had live
music.
musicians, and they drank beer and ate sausage. But I don't remember plays. Now I remember my grandmother being part of the Red Cross. She would go to meetings, and they would make bandages, for the Red Cross.
Now, this, I know you were pretty young at the time, but when you were born, that was, right after World War I in Germany, a defeat in the World War. When you were young, do you remember anyone talking about World War I?
Well, the thing that I remember was inflation. My grandmother and grandfather telling me that they used wheelbarrows full of money. I said, we really didn't use our head because we would sell stuff, but then we would have to pay more. To
replace it costs a lot more.
That's right. That's right.
Your grandfather, I guess he would have been too old to have been in World War I, right?
He was too old to be.
Was he in any other
No,
army
but
or anything like that?
I don't know if you remember telling you that my grandfather came to America. Do you remember?
No.
When my grandfather was a young man, he had went to America, and he loved America. Absolutely loved it. Well, his father, and there was his mother, and there were 2 sisters and a brother. He had to come back to help run the business. He did not want to come back, but he came back, and I remember him. This was a small town, but he would study English. He just loved English. He would study it.
So was that in the late
80s? Because they were married, in the late 1800s. He and my grandmother were
So
married.
that was before he was married, when he was a young man.
Yes, he came, and he...
well, how did he went to San Antonio?
Well,
how did he get there?
What I don't remember, if he went to New York and then down there, or around. But now the relatives in San Antonio were called, the name is Oppenheimer. That was his mother's maiden name. And they were in the banking business. And I remember Dad, Ray Edwards, telling us that they were firm and all.
Right.
But in fact, he had more relatives in New York. And they were all very well-to-do, and they used to come to Germany every year to visit, my grandfather's mother. But you don't remember that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I even remember some of them coming. I do know ones in San Antonio, but I know the 2 cousins who lived in New York. One of who to America for a few days, and another one who lived in Stamford, Connecticut. Yeah.
Okay, back to the friends thing. Who were your good friends back then? You mentioned this Margaret person.
Well,
was she one of your better friends?
Marta Dorna was my best friend. Marta Dorna.
And she was your age?
She was a year older than I was.
She was a year older, and
she had 2 brothers who died in the war.
And she was not Jewish?
No.
Were all your friends there not Jewish, considering there were only...
No, I had, there was Santa, whatever her name was. And...
was Santa Kaufman from...
No.
That was a different Santa.
Anyhow, Santa, and then there was Emma Neuberger.
And they were both Jewish, like
They
you.
were, but one was a year younger, and than I was.
And then you had Mata Donor, who was a non-Jewish friend.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and did you have any other non-Jewish friends?
Oh yeah,
So, was there any recognition in those early days that, hey, I'm a Jew, and that you were different, or
Yeah.
these other people? So,
yes, it got to the place where if I walked down the sidewalk and they came, I'd have to,
right,
step
but in
off.
the early days, was there a time when that
No.
wasn't the case?
No, there was a time when that was not the case.
So when you were very young, say 5, 6, 7, whatever,
Well, then it was, no.
then it was just kind of
wasn't.
carefree and people didn't-
When I started school, for example, and they had religious class in the morning, and so the Catholic students and I had to go an hour later because the school automatically had religion for them. And then the Catholic students, and there were not many, they had their catechism in the afternoon sometimes. There was no priest in town. We had a church, but they had a traveling priest, who came and said mass and taught them catechism.
So there weren't any huge differences, there wasn't like a stigma attached
No,
to being
not-
Jewish or not,
not-
Jewish. You were
not
just
really.
another kid with a different
That's
religion.
Not until Hitler came.
Right,
And of course, Bavaria was the hotbed of
right.
Hitler.
Okay,
And
I'm taking a quick break here. We're going to stop for 1 second. Okay. Okay. Yes. Yeah, I just heard it.
Okay.
Okay. Somebody tell that dog to be quiet. Okay, so continuation of the interview. Okay, so let's, we talked about your early days in Tallamassing. Is there anything else you can tell us about the early days or anything you think might be interesting?
No, the only thing I can say, my early childhood, was very happy and all, but then of course when, after I finished, I wasn't even done with 7th grade, I told my grandparents, I'm not going back to school because I was so discriminated against and,
Why? What happened? What was
beaten
happening
up.
in
They
school?
were hit so well, some of them saying, Greta isn't as bad as Emma, the other girl, because Greta is only half Jewish. Someone who's
So how old were you when all this started, approximately?
5th, 6th grade. How old are you then?
I'm 9, 10, 11.
Yeah. uh-huh.
And so that was when you first remember anti-Semitism?
Remember the Nazis marching, singing their song, the Horst Wessel Lied.
In Tallamassing?
In Tallamassing, and they would throw stones and break windows in our house. And
were these
very scary.
these Nazis, were they soldiers or were they just people wearing
these were
swastikas?
town people who just
Were they wearing swastikas?
uniforms and it was so scary to be, at night in your bedroom and not knowing if a stone was gonna come through the window. But we
So
had
that-
shutters, and I remember my grandmother closing the shutters later on.
And so that sort of thing was going on before you saw it from the kids. First, you remember that. Was that before the kids started discriminating, or about at the same time?
It was about the same time. And the kids, they were taught by their older.
Right. So did they stop being friends with you at that
They
point?
did. They just
And then
did.
you said they would walk on the other side of the street?
They wouldn't make me get off the sidewalk
And so did you kind of bond with the other Jewish kids then? Or how did
Well,
you guys
they-
just kind of do your separate
We had bonded all along.
But did you kind of stick together
We
more
kind of
then?
stuck together, but I remember that Santa was the first one who left town, and she went to school in Nuremberg, where I then later on went to school. As did this Emma came after I was there.
Okay.
They came to the Jewish school. in
So
Nuremberg.
you were getting discriminated against at school, and kids were hitting you. People were marching in the streets and throwing rocks.
That's right.
What other kind of anti-Semitic things were going on then, or Nazi
Well, there were signs all over, like at the marketplace. They had these signs that said Judenblut, Jewish blood, and it would say, the Jews killed Jesus, and the Jews did this, and the Jews did that. You know.
Do you remember talking to your mom or grandparents about it?
I probably did, but I don't remember. All I do remember is that I just don't want to go back to school.
And so you told them you didn't want to go back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know about this other school where your friend was going at that point?
Yes, and then, of course, my mother came to America, and they, I stayed behind, and
So,
in the school.
okay, so before you went off to the school, when you still lived in Tallmessing, your mom left for America?
My mother left for America.
And what year was that?
It was 1936,
Now,
November.
now you had different people living in that house. Why was the decision made, or why was she able to go to America? Why didn't you just go with her?
You know, in order to come to America, you have to have somebody to guarantee in this country. And even though we had distant relatives, they were willing to guarantee for my mother to come, and if she couldn't find a job, they would help her. But they were not willing to do that for both of us. So they said, you come to America, find a job, and then have your daughter come.
Okay, so
And
she went to America.
She came to America, and I never realized that, but it must have been very hard for her. And I remember Nancy telling me, she said, Grandma used to tell me, Nancy, you have no idea.
Yeah, and so then when she left and went to America, that's when you started this other school? When you went away to this boarding school?
It was a little bit later.
But who sent you who got you to the...
Well,
I took a suitcase and got on the train and went.
but who arranged for you to go to this school?
Oh, it must have been my mother or grandparents. They arranged because they had to pay, I had lived in a home, and it was
So it was like a boarding school you went to.
It was, and it was so wonderful to be someplace where there were people who you were in the same boat as you were, and
So it was all Jewish kids.
it was all girls.
And what ages were there?
I was the youngest, which was 8th grade, and then some of them were 16, 17.
Did any non-Jewish kids try to go there and
No, not.
And so that was a regular school where you did reading, writing,
Oh,
and
it was a
arithmetic.
regular Jewish school.
And so was there religious training as well?
Well, I was just going to say, when I lived in Tallmessing, there was a teacher from Nuremberg who took a train to Tallmessing to teach me catechism, so to speak, Jewish stuff. Just me, and my grandparents paid for that. When I went to Nuremberg, it turned out he was my 8th grade teacher. And I loved him. I really did. He was a very, very nice man.
Now, this boarding place that you lived, was that right at the school?
No, it was not. We had to walk to school. It was the synagogue on Essenweinstrasse. Remember, we looked for it when we were there, but it was torn down. There were about 7 or 8 of us, and there was the matron, the woman in charge, and 2 maids.